Hello, hello, and welcome to Millennial Notebook. My name is Stella,
And my name is Emily.
and here we talk about living life as a millennial in the modern age.
Get comfy, grab your notebook, and let's enjoy the ride together.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. I myself am having a wonderful morning sipping my coffee. And this coffee is actually, apparently, the beans were roasted from the lava rocks of Mount Fuji. It's an interesting coffee. It's actually not as bitter as I expected it to be, and I think that's wonderful. I'm not very keen on bitter coffee, and so yeah, I am enjoying my hot coffee on a very cold morning here in Tokyo. And as you've noticed, I am alone today. Emily has prior commitments, and so she won't be able to make it to today's recording. However, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to speak with you about the opposite end of the working experience. And why I say opposite is because Emily is experiencing boredom at work, and she talks more about this in episode 12. I am experiencing the opposite of that, where I'm overworked and very anxious and very stressed. And so I wanted to speak more about that. And I promise this isn't going to be a ranting session. I have actual tips on how to deal with it. And I have applied these tips from my therapist, by the way. And I've applied them, and it helped so much with being able to deal with all of the stress that I've experienced throughout this whole time that I was working. And I'm still applying them today, and throughout my life, I suppose, I would hope. So yeah, let me just jump in. If you've listened to any of our previous episodes, I am a director at a media company, and being in a managerial position, and it's quite it's already quite up there in terms of the corporate ladder. And what comes with that, of course, is a lot of pressure, and I understood that coming into that role. However, I think it wasn't really the position or the workload or the work type that contributed to my stress. It was really certain factors, and I was able to identify 4 that I will be speaking with you today. So let me list them down. So 1, my boss, who is a little bit hard to work with. He's a micromanager, so there's that. 2, minashi zangyo is what we call it in Japanese, but roughly translated in terms of considering its meaning as well, it's basically prepaid overtime. It's usually given to managers or people in managerial roles upwards. Then the working from home setup. And finally, the 4th one, high expectations on myself as well. Okay, so one by one, let's go through them. First, so my micromanager boss. So he's already VP level, as you can imagine, with the structure, right? And after him, there is the CEO already, the president. And because of that, being on the higher end of the managerial structure, it's natural to have more work and to have more pressure to succeed in your role. So this I have no problem with, because I'm a type A personality, and I'm kind of used to the pressure because I don't know, I have a high achieving family structure. So I'm used to having a lot of expectations placed on me, whether that's good or bad. But having a micromanager boss made it really extra difficult because, he would often set unreasonable time limits for tasks that would usually take much more time. And the problem is he's never done these tasks before, so he has no idea about how much time each task would actually take to do. And so he's basically working on assumptions on how much time he thinks it would take to be able to do a specific task. But it's actually not, it actually doesn't take that much time. Or how do I say this? It takes more time to be able to do that. So anyone who's done research knows that it would take at least a day, if you're really quick, and also depending on what you're researching, right? A couple of hours. But he would usually expect something within an hour. Anything beyond that is too much time. And I'm just like, dude, you're asking me to research about so and so, and literally, like, there's so much for me to dig for this. And it would be great if we have like a resource that we can just pull up and have one click, because there are companies that do this for you, right? Do market research, and literally it's all there for you. But it's not. We're doing it for free. I'm doing it all by myself. So I don't know. So there's that. And just, there's also that aspect of like focusing on minute mistakes and never acknowledging the successes. So this is, there's a study on this that it really lowers employee morale if you never acknowledge your successes, or their successes rather, and only focus on the mistakes. I know there is merit to focusing on mistakes just because you learn from them, right? And this is a principle that I myself hold. However, focusing on the mistakes and never acknowledging the successes can really just drop the morale instead of help it. Not that I expect any praise from him. It's really just, it's always, being able to fully understand what had happened with the project needs an understanding of both sides of the successes and also the failures. So there's that. And just basically setting unreachable goals for himself and for me. And, I think what sets you up for success is to be able to understand that you can achieve something. And if you set unreachable goals right from the beginning, then, you wouldn't even know where to start on how to get to that goal, right? So being able to visualize where you're going and whether you can reach that is also an important part of goal setting, which he doesn't really have a good, or he doesn't believe is the way you should do it. And whether or not you agree with me or him, I think a meeting of the minds here is very important, because if you don't, because literally I will be the one who's going to be doing the work, right? And that's why actually goals are set by you. But the thing with him is that he sets them for me, right? The HR has no idea that this is happening, but he's just like, you should do this. And I'm just like, isn't goal setting supposed to be set by you? It's your personal goal. So yeah, so that's that. So all in all, he's kind of hard to work with. And then, okay, so the second one, the prepaid overtime. This one is, it's kind of, I don't know if it's unique to Japan, but it kind of sets you up for a work structure where you just keep working and not get compensated for it. And I think it's fine in terms of, from a company perspective, it's great because you never really have to pay the person for overtime. Technically, it's prepaid, right? So they're like, all right, we're already paying you, so let's overwork you, is the tendency for that. But on the employee's point of view, it's kind of, it doesn't really matter if you work harder, longer, because you'll be paid this set amount of money no matter how long you work. And so it's actually quite demotivating if you're working so many hours beyond your set work hours and you're not even getting compensated for it. And yet it's I guess it's a company culture kind of thing where it's like, okay, we're paying you for the overtime, so you should overtime. And if you're not overtiming, then why aren't you overtiming? Kind of. It's becoming kind of this cycle. And that was tough. And then the next one, working from home, and I think that ties in with that, with the prepaid overtime, because you never really know when to stop. I think this is a personal problem, but just I'm unable to set clear boundaries on when to clock out or eat lunch or eat dinner because I'm a hard worker. And so and I also have high expectations on myself, which I will touch on a little bit in the next point a little bit later. But I never feel like I've done enough, and so I'll just keep working and working and working. And since I'm at home, right, I don't have that mental kind of cutoff. And since I associate my home now with work, since I'm working from home, and anyone who has never lived in Japan before or who is not familiar with the real estate in Japan, in Tokyo in particular, space is very expensive, and so a lot of homes here in Japan usually just have if you're single, if you're not living with anyone, you're probably just gonna have one room, and that will have your desk in it and your bed. So it's very hard to kind of set that mental boundary. And so I associate my resting space with my workspace. And this is a legitimate psychological phenomenon where your brain has associations with specific spaces, and it would literally make it harder for your brain to kind of switch off if you associate a space with work. And that's why they say that to have better quality sleep, you're not supposed to work on your bed. But, working at home kind of makes it difficult for me in that sense to relax in my own space. And so that was another thing that kind of compounded the stress. And then the last one, just high expectations on myself in general. I've mentioned this before, but I'm a recovering perfectionist. And what I mean by that is just, I've worked through therapy that perfectionism really doesn't serve me or my mental health, as perfection doesn't exist. And you can really just do your best. And I'm still recovering, obviously. So as much as I try to avoid seeking perfection, there's still that side of me that still wants a good result. And that's great. It's really, I have a hard time setting that boundary of like, okay, this is the best that I can do for today. And so let's just leave this for tomorrow or whenever, right? Whenever the deadline is. And it never really ends, right? Because I feel like I can always do better. And yeah, so that set me up for a lot of anxiety. And although I pride myself in a solid work ethic, I think it's hard when, corporations will always seek its own kind of merit, right? Of course, because it's an entity outside of its employees. So you have to, as an employee, it's also your responsibility. I've learned nowadays to be able to set healthy boundaries for yourself as well, because the company won't do that for you in most cases. So that was my experience. And as you can imagine, it's all of these put together has led to a very toxic relationship between myself and work. And I found myself very stressed. I had a hard time sleeping. I felt like, I felt like I had very little control over my life. And there was literally no work-life balance at that time before I applied the tips that my therapist taught me, which I will get to very soon. But yeah, I was working majority of my time, and we work on weekends, especially during the busy periods. And busy periods will always come because media, in media there will always be that next big thing, right? And so I wasn't even giving much time for myself anymore. And, up until this job, I put a lot of time, because they're important to me, right? A lot of time and energy into my friendships, my family, my hobbies, my rest, and even just, my physical well-being. I used to go to the gym regularly, exercise regularly, and even that went out the door because I was just so exhausted, right? Like if you're working until 10 p.m., 11 p.m. And there were days where we had to work night shifts because we were adjusting our schedules to some news releases abroad. So we kind of match our schedule to these releases. And so sometimes like my schedule would be upside down, and I'd have to sleep in the daytime during particularly busy seasons, and that made it really difficult, right? Like to go to the gym, because like literally having very little sleep, right? And so I understood. I have empathy for myself during that period, so I understood. And it was just, I was having a tough time, basically. As you can probably tell, I don't know if my voice changed just by how much stress I was coping with throughout that time. But yeah. Anyway, I'm much better, and it's because of the tips that I was able to slowly incorporate through therapy, right? And through the advice and support of my therapist. And here are the tips that she gave me to be able to deal with them, and I hope these help you. So 1, setting boundaries. And what this means is that you just have to know what your limits are. And even if you don't, right, you'll figure it out, right? Like for example, X amount of work for X amount of time is not a fair calculation of my time and investment, because work is set from this amount of time. We agreed to this amount of time, and so I will work for this amount of time, right? And so I didn't have that boundary, right, as I've mentioned before. So just, if we agreed that this busy period will be working for this amount of time, I will do that. But if it's not particularly busy, work, there will always be work, right? And so and if it's not it's not a task that needs to be immediately done, the deadline is not set yet, I just let myself clock out once the once the time for work to end has come. So there's that. And also just the mental boundary of setting when I allow myself to think about work. Because I was thinking about work 24/7. Even in my dreams, I thought about work, if you can imagine how bad it was. And I would wake up and I would think about work, right? I'd be like, oh, okay, I have ABC tasks to do. How do I fix that? So literally, that's what I'm thinking the first thing I wake up. Then I brush my teeth, like, because I work from home, right? So it's literally the routine in the morning. It's just all work, 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 work. And that didn't give me the space to relax, according to my therapist, right? And that ultimately compounded the stress. And so if I'm on vacation, if I am on my, like, if it's the weekend, if it's the pocket of time in the morning before I start work, then I should just let myself not think about work. And so, yeah, it was hard at first, actually, let me tell you, but it's literally just like, if I notice that I'm thinking about work at that moment, I'm gonna kind of give myself a mental nudge and be like, okay, no, we're just gonna think about something else. It was hard. I think what I did with that was just like, I'll clear my mind, just keep, like, try to push it out. Or I'll think about something else, like what I'm gonna be having for breakfast, or what coffee I'm gonna be drinking for that day. So yeah. And also just on the boundary setting, right? Like, since we work from home, like, there was this kind of unspoken understanding that you have to reply as soon as you see the message if you're tagged. But, if you're busy with a particular task, I had to understand that I didn't really have to reply at that moment and completely cut myself off from the task, right? Because it's also, there are studies that if you multitask, you're actually less productive than when you are focusing on a single task. And with the work from home setup of, like, being tagged left and right by colleagues, by my boss, by my subordinates, it was really hard to focus on a specific single task. And I never gave myself that boundary of, like, okay, I'll reply to this after I finish this sentence, stuff like that. It was always immediate. And to be fair, my boss kind of set that up where it's just like, okay, why didn't you reply, like, after 1 minute of not seeing the message when it's not busy season? Like, I don't understand. So, just like understanding that I don't have to reply at that moment and just taking control of my time. And then another boundary would be, voicing out what I can and cannot handle. So this was harder, right? I'm also a recovering people pleaser, but I think it ultimately was the best for me and for the whole organization as well, because just taking what my boss said as something that he thought I could achieve, that's one thing, and then me not thinking I could achieve it is another thing. And so just voicing that out, right? Like, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do this. Like, let's set something else. Just being able to voice that out was another huge step for me in my mental health, and that really helped as well. Because if you ultimately, right, you can always negotiate for something in between. So yeah, and then the next one would be mental self-check-ins. And what this means is just seeing how I'm feeling at that moment. And not even at just that moment, just seeing how I'm feeling throughout the day. So just checking in, right? Checking in with yourself. How am I feeling at this moment? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to breathe? And then you kind of piece it into, you separate it into smaller pieces and to see why you're feeling a specific way and seeing what you can do to help that feeling. So as an example, like, okay, I'm going to check in with myself at this moment. I'm feeling anxious. Why am I feeling anxious? It's because my boss is asking for the progress of project A, and subordinate A has only done this much, but boss A is expecting like already 70% done, and I was instructed not to help subordinate A. So I'm feeling very anxious about that because I have no control over this. What do I do about it? Okay, communicate that subordinate A has only done this much, and that you specifically instructed me not to help with this project, and so we've only done this much. So just, so through piecing that out, I was able to figure out why I was feeling anxious, so thereby separating the feeling from myself, and then finding a solution for it. So this is also hard without enough practice, but I promise it's gonna help if you're able to piece it out. Or you don't even have to have a solution for it. Like, okay, right now I'm feeling really overwhelmed with the work that I have to do. Okay, let me take a break. Let me take 5 minutes to breathe. I do breathing exercises when I'm super anxious. Really helpful. You literally just take a moment to breathe. Close your eyes and breathe. Or take it. Sometimes I take a bathroom break or coffee break. Whatever helps. So there's that. And yeah, and that's been really helpful. Then my third tip would be ideally getting some me time before work. So honestly, this was a tip from my therapist, but I never actually got to do this. I only got to do this once, but I am not a morning person. But unfortunately, society is structured for the morning people. But I am not a morning person, so I struggle with mornings. So literally, I will only wake up maybe 30 minutes before I have to start work. And that's not a lot of me time. But my therapist suggested, and there's also another book that I read that suggested that having some me time before work preps you for an amazing day ahead. So, for example, setting an hour of me time per day so that you can just do whatever you want, like maybe have coffee, go to the gym, or whatever that is for you, whatever that looks like for you. Apparently, that's going to set up a wonderful day ahead of you because you feel more energized for the day because you've done something for yourself. So, yeah, unfortunately, I never got to do this. If you get to do this, if you're a morning person, then that's great. You're going to have a great day according to my therapist. It's supposed to help. And then lastly, getting enough sleep. So there's so many studies on this. I mean, anyone who has been sleep deprived knows and understands this. But having enough sleep really helps your body and mind. And if you're young, it's so much easier to be able to just bypass this. But the older you get, really, the more you realize that sleep is a huge part in maintaining your mental and physical well-being. And if you don't get enough sleep, it actually lessens your focus and productivity and anxiety. Actually, if you don't have enough sleep, it's gonna kind of make your anxiety worse. So if you're experiencing anxiety or stress, my therapist says you should get some more sleep. So I worked from home, so that was actually, I was able to adjust to this, just sleeping a little bit earlier, because back then I would sleep really late, right? Because I was mentally rebelling from working so much that I was just like, no, I'm gonna get some time in for my hobbies. And that's fine. I needed it, or else I'd feel like I wasn't living anymore, right? I was literally just working. And so that was fine, but just reducing that time, right? For back then, I would do some of my hobbies, do some reading, relaxing, watching some movies from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. because that's literally the only time I could find some time for myself. And then I'd be waking up at like 9 a.m., right? So that's not enough time. So I just cut that down to half. And cutting that down to half ultimately gave me a little bit more time to sleep and recover. So there you go. I hope these would help you. And please do try them out, because they did help me feel so much more balanced, and they really helped with lessening the anxiety that I felt with work and from work. And I will put all of these in the show notes, don't you worry. And yeah, if you get to try them, do let me know if they worked for you in the comments. I'd be very happy to know if any of these tips helped you out. And yeah, I hope you know that I'm here for you. I'm your best friend. I'm your online best friend. Me and Emily are your online best friends. So let us know if any of our tips help. And I hope you know that you're not alone when you deal with this. Like, we'll all get through this together. So yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye-bye!